Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
This would be the time, Craig, where we say goodbye to another prominent and very influential actor, Nichelle Nichols, who had the very groundbreaking role of playing Uhura on the original Star Trek series, a black woman who, at the time, there were hardly any black women on TV, let alone black women who kissed a white man, and that happened on Star Trek. So she was very groundbreaking in her role on that series, and she died recently. We are honoring her today by picking a horror movie that she's been in. And she's been in a couple horror movies, 2 or 3. A few of them, I think, later in life, but this one that we picked, we felt probably had the most prominent role. Mm-hmm. And the movie that we're doing is from 1986. It's called The Supernaturals. And I hadn't heard of this movie before, but then when I looked at the cover art from the VHS thing, I was like, oh yeah, I've definitely seen this on the shelves in the horror section. I just never rented it. This movie was released, I guess it was released in theaters. I didn't get a lot of information about this film when I was looking online for it. It then was subsequently released on VHS, and there it stayed. There's not been like a cleaned up DVD version or anything like that. And so, sadly, like the version that we watched, the quality was quite poor, even though we were on Amazon Prime and renting it from there.
Yeah.
It was really dark and murky, and it looked like a transfer from VHS.
Yeah.
To the point where you could see, the roll of the line a couple of times down. I forgot almost what that was like, when you're watching a VHS tape and there's like a line that rolls down the screen. It's just so analog, and we're so digital now. So we're doing The Supernaturals, which was, once again, 1986 movie that she did, that she plays a sergeant. I guess a sergeant.
Yeah.
And there were a couple other horror films she'd been in. I think there was one anthology, and then she was in like one story in it. But I think we more or less felt that probably the meatiest horror movie role that she did was probably in this film. So this is the one we're doing. But I had never rented it. I'd never seen it before this. How about you?
No, I hadn't either. I can't say that I'm terribly surprised that this kind of falls in the forgotten category, because it's just okay, frankly.
I feel like you're being generous when you say that, honestly.
No, it is. It's okay. The acting is fine, and we'll get into all that, whatever. But when Nichelle Nichols passed, I'll be 100% honest. I'm not a Trekkie. I've never really gotten into Star Trek. It's such a cultural phenomenon that, of course, I'm very much aware of it, and I'm very much aware of the people who are associated with it and who have been a part of it. But it's just not anything that I ever got into. This will tell you how much of a Trekkie I am. The only Star Trek movie that I've really seen is the one with the whales, which is the one that everybody hates.
Oh God.
it's the bastard stepchild. and that's the only one that I've seen, and I liked it.
Well, I'm not a Trekkie either, and I like sci-fi. I love it. I like sci-fi, I like fantasy, I like horror. I grew up reading this stuff more than I watched it, honestly. And even when it comes to Star Trek, I think all my friends and my cousins and everybody, I think they were way more into it than I was. Like, I loved it, don't get me wrong, but like, I didn't have the toys, and I wasn't watching it on repeat, and I wasn't kind of obsessed about it. And Star Wars was more exciting to me than Star Trek.
Yeah.
Then later in life, I started watching Star Trek, and I realized why people love it so much. It's heady. It's a thinking person's series. It's not action and swashbuckling. It has those elements, but really it's sci-fi as I read it. It's Isaac Asimov. It's Ray Bradbury. It's like very intellectual kind of serious thoughts about the future and the possibilities for humanity and what would things be like. And within the context of science fiction, you can toy around with these like self-reflexive ideas about, what is the nature of us and why do we do the things we do and why do we say the things we say and, and all that. Like that series in the 60s was incredibly groundbreaking. And I just have to say, like, the appeal to it for me is you have a society that I kind of want our society to be like, where nobody has to worry about work anymore. Everything's kind of taken care of. So now humanity has the luxury and the technology to just be able to explore and be able to see what else is out there and confront it. And then in the series, they confront races that are what you might say further behind in civilization than we are, far ahead in civilization that we are, but with this notion that, they're not going to try to influence what they find. And that's really impossible, right? You by showing up and by being there, you're going to influence it. But they do their best. And I find myself coming more and more to Star Trek. I've been watching like Next Generation. I've been watching some of this stuff. And this is places where, in a way that, don't get me wrong, literature has been there for a long time, exploring this idea and stuff. But as far as mainstream mass pop culture kind of stuff people are watching on television, it was very much a groundbreaking show, introducing people to ideas and concepts and just ways of thinking that were very different from what was on television at the time, which is sitcoms mostly and things like that. And then, like Gene Roddenberry, I don't think you could say enough nice things about what he did through that series. He very much insisted that this has to be a multicultural cast because this is what the future would look like. Which, if you watch any movies of the future from the 50s, the 60s and things, it looks surprising, it looks very white. But this movie was definitely not. You have George Takei, there's an Asian American on there. You've got Uhura, one of the very first prominent roles for black women on there. Same thing with the Asian American with George Takei. What a great series. And I think that you can't really say enough how groundbreaking it was for these people to give these, not just to give these people opportunities, but to show the rest of at least American society and culture at that time, like, this is what the future probably will look like and what it could look like. It's going to have these people in it. And we're going to confront that head on, despite what the censors say and despite what the executives say people want or whatever. And we're going to go full force with it. And they did it. And I think it had an indelible impact. And Nichelle Nichols was right there in the middle of it. And she's a great actress.
Right.
So it's all that. Not to diminish her as a person, and her abilities and her skills. She's really good in that role.
Right. She's very talented. That's the point. Despite the fact that I have not personally been a fan, and I don't even want to say that because I'm a fan of the premise and the idea and everything that it represents. I just am not cultured in.
You just never really, there's a lot of stuff to watch.
I've not gotten into it.
And you're just not into that. I get it. I totally get it.
But the point is, when Miss Nichols passed away, despite the fact that I personally haven't seen a lot of these movies and the original series, I felt like we needed to do this because she is such a prominent and influential force in our culture. Now, had it not been her, it may have been someone else. She had a personal relationship with Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek. According to her, they were romantically involved for a number of years before Star Trek, and remained very, very close throughout. When he passed away, she performed a song at his funeral that she had written in his honor. They had a very solid relationship. But regardless, she did, she was groundbreaking. Like you said, she wasn't the first black woman on television. She wasn't the first black woman in film, but she was among the very first black women who were given roles other than the maid or the mammy or, whatever.
Exactly.
She was a prominent character, she was an equal amongst them.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Roddenberry was trying to do. And I think that it makes a lot of logical sense, but in the 1960s, it just wasn't done. Especially when you're talking about a series that would go on to, spawn a bazillion other series and films that's intergalactic in scope. You're dealing with not only human beings of different colors and races and creeds, but all different types of alien races and whatnot. It would only make sense that those divisions between races would blur and potentially disappear when everything becomes that diverse. And like you said, yeah, she's best known for this role, but she was an accomplished singer and dancer and actress before this. She was accomplished after this. She continued working. She just did so many cool things. She performed on stage. She recorded albums. She worked for fucking NASA.
Yeah.
She worked for NASA for many years, recruiting diverse people for their astronaut programs. Just such a cool lady. And I know that later in her life, in the last, 5-10 years or so, at some point she suffered a small stroke. She struggled with dementia. She retired from doing conventions and things because her mental clarity suffered. But just such a cool lady. And we do this a lot. We do these tribute episodes a lot. But I just really felt like, God, if anybody deserves it, it's her. And I think that she really had a cultural impact that probably maybe not most, but probably a lot of people don't even realize and maybe never will realize. But I just have so much admiration and respect for her. And this movie, The Supernaturals, is, it's fine. It's 80s. It's not great, but even in this, she's good.
I mean,
her character doesn't have a whole lot to do, but she's solid. She plays like the hard ass sergeant, and I believe her.
Yeah,
she carries herself with such strength and gravitas, and she's really a highlight of this film. There's not a whole lot to talk about, really, as far as the movie is concerned, but damn, she's good in it.
Yeah,
in the relatively small role that she plays.
Well, I mean, I'm just gonna throw my opinion on the table. I thought it was kind of a cheap throwaway made-for-TV movie. It sure feels like it. Like the soundtrack feels like it. I wish I had seen this film in the way it was originally intended. I mean, it was obviously shot on film. It was probably shot with care. The VHS transfer and subsequent digitization that I saw just made it look bad, and you couldn't even tell what was happening half the time because it's kind of dark and murky. And so, this might be one of those films that might really benefit from a cleanup and a digital re-release that's proper, and I might look a little more highly on it. But it's kind of all over the place plot-wise. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's got about 5 or 6 different head-scratching loose ends on it.
It's kind of boring.
It's really halfway through the movie, almost exactly the halfway through the movie mark, that anything happens. And what by anything happens, anything at all interesting happens.
Yeah.
and then when things kind of start happening, it's just all over the place, and you're just kind of scratching your head at what's going on, and then it's over. She wasn't given a huge role, but nobody has a huge role in this.
No.
I was actually surprised when it's fired up and I saw this face on there. I was like, please tell me that's definitely the guy who was in Grease 2, right? Because if not, my memory serves me. And yeah, I looked it up. Yeah, it's the dude from Grease 2. The really hot, handsome-looking dude from Grease 2 who I thought, I can't believe has not gone on to be the next James Dean just based on his looks alone.
Well, Maxwell Caulfield. Maxwell Caulfield is a cautionary tale.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he was like he said in interviews that he was Hollywood's new golden boy. Like they were telling him that he was the next Richard Gere. Like he was just set to, be this huge rising star. Very talented, history and theater, musical theater. He could sing, he could dance, he could act. He's gorgeous. And he just had this incredible career ahead of him. And then Grease 2 happened.
Oh.
After Grease 2, nobody would touch him.
You're kidding.
Nobody would touch him. And he really feels... At this point, he's kind of over it, but like he was really bitter about it for a really long time because he couldn't get work. Except in stuff like the Supernaturals, maybe. I don't know if this came before or after Grease 2. But yeah, and now he looks back on it and he says, I have to be grateful for being a part of a cult phenomenon because I think Grease 2 is stupid. I never liked it. I never saw the appeal of it, but I know there are a lot of people who really like it. There are some people who like it better than the original.
As kids, we watch it all the time, so we liked it. But we were kids.
Yeah.
Nowadays, no.
His other big role was in Empire Records with Liv Tyler and Renee Zellweger, I think in the late 90s. And he played kind of an iconic role in that. He played like an aging pop star. His name was Rex Manning, and they were celebrating Rex Manning Day at the record store. And like that role and that movie have also kind of given him cult status, and he embraces that, but he's still a little bit bitter. But he's still working.
Oh yeah, like every year, all year. I mean, ever since this was his like. This came after Grease 2 for sure. Grease 2 was in 82. This was in 86. He did a few things. Electric Dreams is this like classic 80s movie. Did you ever see that?
No.
Oh my God! It's about a cello player and a computer, and there's almost no more 80s movie than Electric Dreams. Honestly, he had a small role on Dynasty for a few episodes, like 9, and then he was doing the Supernaturals and stuff like this. He was in Waxwork 2, Lost in Time, which I'm sure we'll do at some point because we did the original, and I have actually fonder memories of the sequel. So. Since the mid-'80s, early '80s, steadily he's had 3 or 4 to 5 roles every year. So
and still working.
Yeah. For sure.
I think that I've seen some of the stuff that he's been in recently, and I think that I just didn't recognize him because, of course, now he's older and he looks different.
You know what he looks like now? He looks like kind of like a Roger Moore, like James Bond era Roger Moore. He's still
kind of. Yeah, he's a handsome man, and he's not a bad actor, and he's fine in this. And I think that he's basically cast for his looks, like he's the very handsome one. Like that's kind of his role.
Right.
He's a private. So Nichelle Nichols plays Sergeant Leona Hawkins, and she's leading this. I don't know what you call them. You're the military kid. What would you call this? What are they? Like a unit?
Unit, troop, group, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, of people. They're just. It doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense from a military standpoint, though. Let's just get that out there.
Sure, fair enough. But it's supposed to be like a training exercise where they get dropped off in the woods for 3 days and they're going to be training or something. I don't know, whatever. Sergeant Hawkins, Nichelle Nichols is in charge, and then it's just a whole group. I don't even know how many of them there are, too many to keep track of, 8 or something. And another one of them is Private Angela Lejeune, who's played by Talia Balsam, who I am not personally familiar with, but she, like, look at her IMDb page. She is working all the time. Like she's everywhere, and she's currently working on some series right now.
She's
I think
in Mad Men. She was Mona Sterling in Mad Men, which is a big role.
Yeah. And then Private Michael Osgood is played by LeVar Burton,
right?
who who for forever in my heart will be the Reading Rainbow guy.
Right.
But he did a big stint on Star Trek. Also, he was the guy that wore those funny sunglasses things.
Geordi. Yep. The blind guy on Star Trek. Yeah, Geordi. Can't remember his last name, but yeah, Geordi. Yeah, on Star Trek. Star Trek: The Next Generation.
There are a couple of other familiar faces in here too from the 80s, and a couple of people who continued to work and who continue to work. One of the Gibbs brothers from the Bee Gees makes a cameo in the film. He originally wrote the score for the movie, but it was rejected in favor of a different score. Supposedly, there's a cut of the movie out there where you can hear the Gibbs score, but that's not
to hear it.
What we saw.
What we saw was just a lame, very standard kind of, I thought, like generic score, to the point where it was so generic it was almost distracting. Like, God, it cheapened the movie so much.
Yeah, and the thing is, here we are almost halfway through. We've barely talked about the movie at all. It's because there's really not much to talk about. Okay, so the premise is it opens with a flashback, I guess, to 1865. This is in Alabama. It's during the Civil War. This young kid is playing amongst the dead bodies of these Confederate soldiers, and
Right.
he's like picking pieces of their uniforms off of their bodies and putting them on, like he's like playing dress up or whatever. And an older Confederate soldier approaches him.
Jeremy, now that your daddy's gone, you've got to take care of your mama. You understand? Now listen, I want you to go home. You go straight home. You take Hopkins Road, the long way, and you stay out of that holler, because it's been mined. We put those mines there to kill Yanks and keep them out of our land, not to kill little boys. You understand?
Yes, sir.
You got to take care of yourself too, Jeremy, because you're special. We've all seen that. God has smiled on you, boy.
But then both he and the soldier who warned him are captured by Union soldiers, and they're forced to walk across this field that they had planted mines in. And the Union general or whatever is like, your mines have cost us lots of men and lots of time, so now you're gonna hunt them out for us or whatever. And he forces them to walk across this minefield, and he tells them, if you make it all the way across, then you can just keep going and be free. Well, they walk across, and all of them get blown up except for the kid. And then when the kid walks, like, once he gets all the way across and he turns around and he looks back, the Union general's like, do it again. And the kid looks scared, and the wind starts to blow, and his hand starts to glow. And then it quick cuts to the future. And it quick cuts so much and doesn't give us a new, it gave us a title card for the past, but it didn't give us a new title card. I started watching this on YouTube. It's available on YouTube. And at this point, I'm like, something must have gotten cut out. So I went and rented it on Amazon. No, nothing got cut out. It's just an unexplained cut to, I don't know, I guess modern day, although it's very clearly the 80s. And you've got the same unit 44 or whatever, but, of course,
modern day.
100 years later, or more.
I mean, let's just talk real quick about, like, the silliness of all of this. This minefield that they're making them walk across is, like, smaller than my backyard.
Yeah. Walk around it, Jesus.
But it's got, like 15 mines in it, apparently, like all within feet of each other. Like, who would do that, right? So it's kind of silly. And the whole movie is sort of shot in the woods, basically, but it just feels like the woods down the street. I never felt, to me anyway, like a very desolate location. And then, I don't know, I don't really think that like units and unit numbers and things from the Union soldier side of the Civil War have therefore carried through to the modern army, where those units still exist and have the same number. I mean, it's very silly. And everything that's military, I'm not an expert in the military, but I was a military brat, and some, you don't even need to be a military brat to kind of recognize that a lot of the things that they do in this movie are kind of dumb and silly. And if you can't even have a modicum of care towards a slight amount of authenticity for this, it kind of degrades all of it. It takes the whole movie into silly territory when you're only just like 15 minutes in.
And when we jump to the future, it's just these two guys. Like, I guess they're supposed to be like scouting this location or like setting up perimeter flags or something. It's totally unclear. But then like the wind blows and the ground opens up and it's like glowing and it like swallows them down. And then we never really hear anything about them again.
Nothing more about these two guys.
Well, I feel like later somebody stumbles upon one of their heads.
It took me forever to figure out it was one of them. Yeah, I thought it was LeVar Burton there for a quick second.
I did too. Because there's only two black guys in the movie, so
yeah. 50-50 chance, yeah.
Right, but then it cuts away from them and it cuts back to this, group of soldiers who are coming here for the training mission, and they horse around and you kind of get to meet all of them, and you find out that Maxwell Caulfield's character, Private Ellis, can run fast. Like, who cares? And then really nothing happens for the next 45 minutes.
Oh my God.
Like,
nothing.
The only thing that happens is that they keep running across this middle-aged white woman in all white, just like hanging out in the woods. And she makes googly eyes with Ellis, like, I don't know, 700 times over the next 45 minutes. And that's really the only thing that happens. Like, there's hijinks, like, I don't know, one guy screws around with his gun and just random things, like Ellis finds a skull and they're like, oh, cool. Like, nothing happens.
I'm sorry to say this because it's just a movie. Who cares? But like, the military is not like this, right? If you're going to go out for a training mission in the woods, everything's going to be quite serious. And these guys are like their fraternity out there, farting around, playing around, tossing skulls, drinking beer, joking,
making out.
That was bizarre. There's a woman in this group, and her name is Lejeune.
Lejeune. Mm-hmm.
There's a moment where they're all sitting around a campfire and they're chatting, and then Lejeune is out there. I mean, seriously, it's like kind of from a Friday the 13th movie more than it's from like a movie where there's supposed to be military activity happening. They're sitting around a campfire chatting, and Lejeune is kind of off by herself. And so our main character, Ellis, walks up to her, and they have a little conversation. And throughout the course of their conversation, real quickly, we realize that they've had a relationship before, which is weird. And then they, talk about it in this professional situation, which is also weird. And then they kiss. What? This is not military activity. I mean, it's just not going to... I mean, don't get me wrong. This kind of thing can happen, but it's not going to happen out in the open. While you're in the middle of this drill, where then the sergeant, Nichols, comes over and is like, you guys cut it out.
Please be advised that you're pulling double shift guard duty tonight. That's 2200 to 0200. It should help you keep your mind on proper military conduct. That's in 5 minutes.
Like, okay. Sorry, Mom.
And I feel bad for her because I feel like her character, all she really could do in this movie was just to be tough and bark orders at people. She didn't get much beyond that.
No. But nobody does. Like, it's an ensemble cast, I guess you would say, but all that means is that everybody's spread really thin. So you don't really know anybody. You don't really care about anybody. Like, I never really even got it. Like, are Ellis and Lejeune currently an item? Did they used to be, and maybe they're, like, rekindling or something? Because he's also not necessarily overtly flirting with the mysterious woodswoman, but kind of.
Yeah.
And right in front of Lejeune.
Yeah.
So maybe they're not in a relationship.
And I
don't know.
There's a mysterious woodswoman, and everybody's just like, huh, that's interesting. Like, there's no, you're supposed to be out in the middle of nowhere, right? And there's some woman in a white dress by herself who's coming and going. Like, that's bizarre enough to at least treat it a little differently than these people treat it.
Well, and the sergeant asks her, like, who are you? And she's like, I'm Melanie. And she's like, do you live here? Well, yeah, around here. Well, are there more of you? Yeah, maybe. Like, just...
Yeah, she's that way the whole time. And they just put up with it. Like, they'll just
You're right, like, she just keeps showing up in their camp. Like
a stray dog, that comes and goes. They'll ask her questions, even in later on in the movie when scenes get intense and it's like, look, we need answers from you because you clearly have something to do with this. They'll ask her questions and she'll just not answer. And that'll be okay with them. Like, they don't...
Right.
Just so maddening. It's just so silly. And, when I was out and about, because I was trying so hard to dig up information on this movie and I could find so little, there is a reviewer online, which is why... this is why I rarely read reviews when I'm doing this, who says, the characterizations of the soldiers are also well developed. The director may have well been inspired by Aliens, which came out about the same time as the Supernaturals. Although, if anything, the characterizations of the soldiers here are superior to the ones in Aliens. What?
Oh, please.
Absolutely not. That it's the opposite. No. And then this person goes on to say, there is a very funny scene with a drunken Bobby DeCiccio forcing his way into Talia Balsam's tent.
That is not a funny scene at all.
It's not funny at all. Oh my God.
It's a scene that never would be filmed today. Like, I think that they thought they might have been funny, but it's not. So he's like the douchey one. That's established. Like, he's the douchey one, and he's kind of hit on her before. And again, I know even less about the goings on of the military than you do, but I would imagine, and I could be entirely wrong, so those of you out there
keep going,
who know about things,
set us straight.
I'm just talking straight out of my butthole, but I could imagine that women in the military face some of this misogynistic crap, and that it's probably, a very real part of their lives that they have to learn to deal with, and I'm sure that they find ways to deal with it, and I'm sure that a lot of them deal with it with humor or, wit or whatever. But he crawls into her tent at night, her small tent, and is like kind of trying to sweet talk her, all the while pulling his pants down. Like, he's hovering over her and he's pulling his pants down.
Yeah.
Like, she's just gonna be like, oh, well, thank goodness you're here, and have sex with him. It comes across as very rapey, and I guess the joke is that she kind of sort of plays along with it until he's mostly depantsed, and then she puts her knife between his legs, I guess right up against his dick or his balls or whatever, and, sends him scurrying off into the night. It's not funny. It actually made me very uncomfortable. I didn't like it at all.
Yeah.
It's gross.
It was gross. It wasn't funny. It was weird. I feel like even in the early to mid 80s, this wasn't even that funny.
No.
And it's all of this is unnecessary. We're like halfway through the movie, and all we've gotten are these hijinks with these sort of like, oh, this guy's a douchebag. This guy's the pretty boy. This woman is mysterious and she's in the woods. And
there's like a simple one.
And they found an area that's a clearing where it's just like yellow ground or something. And they're like,
everything's dead.
This is bizarre. It's dead. Oh, and at one point, Court falls in a hole. It's more like a trap. And he looks around and he finds a lantern and he finds a corpse and he sees a scarecrow. I guess they think they're building some suspense or they think they're building some intrigue. But all this stuff is just, I don't know what to say. Like, it's just a hodgepodge of random stuff that doesn't feel particularly sinister. Another thing they find is, there's a bunch of sticks, right, that are in their way, sharpened to points. Like, they're blocking the path.
A booby trap.
Kind of like a booby trap, like a mysterious thing. And one of them, I can't remember who it is, speaks up and says, oh, this must date back to like the Confederate times because this is like the Napoleonic Wars. They used things like this. And I'm like, what? Even in the 80s, would you consider that these sticks that you found in the woods have been there since Confederate times?
No, they have very clearly been like freshly carved.
So it's all so hokey and silly. And we're halfway through, and this is all that's happened. It's that guy, right, at Court who gets pushed away by Lejeune from his attempted rape, who then stumbles off into the glowing, smoky woods, right? He doesn't really have a motivation for it.
I think he hears a noise or something. I don't know.
A dark figure comes up behind him, which we can't see clearly, and he runs. He falls into another one of these pit traps, and now he's in a cave with a wooden roof and a bunch of lanterns that are lit. That's when we see this head, I guess. I thought, like I said, I thought it was Oz. And I don't know, he's got something in his mouth, like he's been, I don't know what.
I didn't know what that was. I have no idea. What lured Court out into the woods is that they're glowing now.
Yeah, they're blue and glowing and smoky, right?
And he's very like, "That's blue. Weird." So he goes out there, like you said, he falls in. The first time somebody fell in there, I don't remember who it was. Like, first they thought it was like a booby trap, and then they're like, no, it's a bunker. Well, it turns out it's like a whole freaking tunnel system. But while he's down there, a zombie comes out of the wall, and Court tries to climb out, but he's being pursued by more than one zombie. And then it cuts to the next morning and he's missing, and they go looking for him and they find his body. At first they think he's just passed out, but against a tree. He's dead. And then the sergeant looks at all the other soldiers and she's like, "This is totally your fault." Like, what?
Right. You're supposed to be paying attention. You're doing this, you're doing whatever. Chews them all out. And then gets to work, and she asks Weir to contact base on the radio. Said, "I don't care what it takes. You get a signal." So he's got to climb a tree for that. Then asks 3 others to go with her to go looking for something, whatever.
Yeah, I don't know what they're looking for.
And they end up finding a cabin in the woods, and so they break in, and there's nothing in there for a while.
No, except this is my favorite part of the movie. In this 100-and-something-year-old cabin, Ellis finds a perfectly intact journal.
Yes.
Of a Confederate widow.
From 1865.
Perfectly preserved.
Yeah.
It shows him turning the pages. He could have bought this at Borders yesterday.
It's so true.
She's writing about how her dearest Evan has gone off to war and she hasn't heard from him in a long time. And then, in another entry, it's like, news of Evan's death came today, but thank God I still have Jeremy. If it weren't for him, I'd probably just die. Well, so it's pretty obvious that this is the mother of the kid from the opening scene.
Right, Jeremy is that kid. Yeah.
Yeah. And then they find this old, decrepit, white-haired man just huddling in a corner. He doesn't talk. He doesn't do anything. He's just huddling there in the corner. And then Melanie, the woman in white, shows up.
Just suddenly. And
yeah, just out of nowhere, just shows up.
Won't answer any questions.
No, won't answer any questions, but at this point, wasn't it pretty freaking obvious what was happening?
Yeah, of course you know what's going on, yeah.
Yeah, like, obviously, and of course this comes in a reveal later, but the old white-haired dude is Jeremy, and the mysterious woman in white, Melanie, is his mom. Now, at this point, we don't really know how or why that could be, but it seemed perfectly obvious in the moment.
Of course.
Anyway.
So
I don't know.
Yeah, they leave there, and they're all looking at a map and trying to figure out how they're going to go to some other place and where they're going to go. The radio isn't working, and then suddenly, like, they're under fire. Somebody starts shooting at them, and it's
unseen forces. Yeah, and this goes on for a while.
Forever.
Like, they're just getting fired on,
Forever.
and like some of them get shot, and then some more of them get shot, and then
Sedge thinks he's seeing a zombie, and he shoots at him, but it turns out it's Oz. So now Oz is dead.
So he's killed him, and then Sedge runs away into the forest because I don't know what he's running for. I guess he's just so distraught over having killed his friend. And, like, he sees a zombie that startles him, so he jumps back and he impales himself on one of those spikes. I have to say that, oddly, this was an oddly sad moment. Like, he impales himself on this spike, and then Ellis finds him, and the actor's like, Ellis, I can't move. Why can't I move? And he looks down and he sees the spike coming through his chest, and he, like, starts crying before he dies. And I was like, huh?
Yeah, that was... I mean, it was a touching moment, and otherwise odd scene. Like, that chase went on forever. And then it's like, oh, zombie, back up, and then impalement, you know? And then when Ellis finds him, there's no zombie there, you know?
No.
It just, all these threats come and go, all the while they're in this weird woods, and this woman in the white dress is just sitting there silently, sort of watching all this happen, right, from where they are. And then Jejune, I don't know what this whole deal was. I guess she finds something, and it looks like It's
a Confederate bullet that earlier in the movie Ellis had found
a bullet.
But it's not like a modern bullet.
Yeah,
it's like a
what do you call it?
It's a ball. Like
yeah.
And he had found it and he had given it to her, and she finds one and compares it, and they're the same. So I think that it's supposed to be like she figures out, why are we being shot with Confederate bullets? Like, it doesn't make any sense. At that same time, Melanie, who's sitting there right next to her, disappears and reappears
immediately
in the forest, where she finds Ellis carrying Sedgwick's body back. And because she appears out of nowhere, he looks at her and says, "It's you. You're making this happen. Why?" And then she shows him a flashback, which is basically the opening scene, but we get more information. After the little kid had walked through and the Union general had ordered him to do it again, she, Melanie, his mother, arrived, and she saw him, and she ran across the minefield. I guess, in theory, she didn't know it was a minefield. I don't know. To try to get to him, and she got blown up by a mine. But he, with his glowing hands, revived her, like brought her back from the dead. And so she runs to him and she grabs him and she holds him. But then she stares directly into the camera ominously. Like, I have in my notes, like, he brought her back, but is she different? It's so stupid.
Now she's evil.
Yeah, and then she just lays it out. You know, she tells him that the old man in the cabin is Jeremy. She's like, "He's my son and yours. Come with me, Evan." And I'm like, "What?" And so she shows him a picture in her locket, and it's him, but with a mustache. And she's like, our love is eternal or something. I don't know. And he yells at her and she runs away. And then he runs and he falls, but like zombie arms like come out of the ground.
Zombies are coming after him.
And then they chase him and he's fighting him. And oh my God. And I guess this is supposed to be the conclusion. Like the remaining soldiers, like Weir is like the simple one. I really liked him. He was really sweet. Oh, I have a theory, and if you haven't seen the movie, this will probably mean nothing to you, but you've seen the movie. I think Weir and Chris were a couple.
Because they're always together?
Because they're always together, and they're always very concerned about each other's safety. And I think they're cute.
Could be.
They're a cute little couple.
Could be.
But
Cute
then
couple.
Weir gets grabbed by a zombie, but Chris saves him, but then they both end up getting killed anyway. And Ellis goes back to the cabin and visits old man Jeremy, and Melanie bursts in and she's like, "Get away from him!" But Ellis turns to Jeremy and he's like, "You can end all of this, all of the pain and the suffering. You can end it." And then I thought that a zombie shot Ellis, because that's what it looked like, and
It did.
but I guess not, because he's fine. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Kind
But
of grazed him or something.
he says to the old man, "End it, send her back." And so Jeremy does the whole like glowing hands thing.
Animates her back to the land of the dead. Yes.
Yeah, she glows and screams and disappears. Ellis looks back at old man Jeremy and he's dead. He's just sitting there like with his face to the ceiling and his eyes wide open. Oh God, that poor guy. Just been living out there in the woods with his ghost mom for the past 100 years. That's horrible.
Decides to end it because this guy suggests it. You can end the suffering. Oh yeah, I guess you're right. I can. It's like Dorothy with her ruby red slippers, right? You could have done all this all the time.
It only took 100 years.
I guess I might as well.
It only took 100 years for somebody who looks exactly like his dead dad to show up and tell him it's okay.
Right? Are we supposed to think that he's like a descendant or something?
I have no flippin' idea.
Oh,
it's so stupid.
As we're describing this movie, it sounds way more interesting than it actually plays out on screen.
It's not interesting. It's boring. Don't watch it.
It's boring and confusing and hard to see and weird and not satisfying at all.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, so I started watching it on YouTube, and the transfer was bad. Like, it was obviously a transfer from a VHS, and then that was another thing that led me to rent it from Amazon. I'm like, oh, surely it will be better quality on Amazon. Nope. No, the quality, you can't, quality. Yeah, it's crappy. And it just made me think, this is how we used to watch movies all the time, and we thought it was fine. That's... Yeah,
because also the screens were smaller and lower resolution, too, so it didn't even look as bad on those little screens, right?
We're spoiled now. I mean, that's what movies looked like when we were growing up. It was terrible. Oh, my God, we had it so rough.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Thank God we lived this long.
Thank God. Then it's morning. And Ellis goes back to camp and he finds Melanie's locket and he's greeted by Lejeune, who, I don't know, embraces him or something, and so he drops the locket. Hawkins is still alive and, wisecracking. I don't even remember what she says, but, none of them seem particularly bothered by the fact that everybody else is dead.
I know.
Nor do Lejeune or Hawkins ask for any kind of explanation of what happened? Thank God that's over. Let's get out of here.
Wow. One of the worst training exercises ever.
So they put Hawkins, because she, I think she got shot in the leg or something, so they put her between them and they just walk out of there.
Leave. Yeah.
And that's the end. And then there's some cheesy song over the credits. God. Oh, man.
Oh, God.
I wish there had been anything really to like about this movie because, this happens all the time. We do these tribute movies to these people, but it's because, Nichelle Nichols is not a horror staple.
No.
Horror is what we do. It's not necessarily what she did. This isn't her best work. But even that said, I mean, she does perfectly fine with what she's given to work with. I mean,
That's the key. Yeah.
She plays the hard-nosed sergeant believably and well, and she looks good doing it. To be fair, nobody in the movie is terrible. I mean, Maxwell Caulfield is beautiful and beautiful to look at. He's got great hair. I'm super jealous of his hair. Well, of everything. He's incredibly handsome. I'm happy to see LeVar Burton in anything. I have just such a soft spot for him in my heart from my childhood. That this is the guy that got our generation reading. I loved that show. And he's got a great voice, and he would read the books, and they would show the illustrations from the books. Man, I loved that. So it's always nice to see him. And it is a movie that you said that you remembered seeing it on the shelves. I don't remember seeing it. I didn't know anything about it. I feel like it's kind of been lost to time, and I understand why. It's not remarkable. It's not memorable. It's the type of movie that falls by the wayside for a reason, because there's just really nothing. There's just not much to say about it.
It's just lame. I mean, it's just a dumb movie cobbled together. The script is silly. None of it makes sense. It's not even particularly well shot. It's dark and things. Hopefully that's just a factor of the transfer. You got these famous people in it, famous at the time, perfectly capable, but they have nothing to work with. And so, sadly, here we are with our tribute episode, as you said, always, for Nichelle Nichols. And we're talking about her horror movie, which for about 90% of the famous actors and actresses that we talk about on this series, their horror movies are not usually their standout products for them.
Right.
So it's just an excuse for us to find something, that we wouldn't otherwise find and pay tribute to somebody, that we care about otherwise and has had an...
Right, and that I legitimately respect and admire. I mean,
oh yeah,
this woman was a trailblazer. That you can't take that away from her. Whoopi Goldberg credits Nichelle Nichols with being one of the people who inspired her to be an actress, who made her believe that people who looked like her could do it. You can't underestimate this woman's influence. After the first season of Star Trek, she was just already kind of sick of the racist bullshit that she was facing from critics and the public, and she was ready to walk away. She was being offered other projects. She was being offered projects on stage. And she went to Gene Roddenberry. She went to Gene Roddenberry and she turned in her resignation. And he said, look, I really, really don't want to lose you. Take the weekend. And if you come back and you still want to leave, I'll let you go. No hard feelings, but I really don't want to. And that weekend, she participated in some sort of convention or rally for the NAACP, and somebody approached her and said, a fan would like to speak with you, and she said, that's fine. And that fan was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He came and just gushed about what a huge fan he was. He said that that Star Trek was the only show that he allowed his children to stay up at night to watch. And when she told him that she was planning on leaving, he said, you cannot. You are representation. You're the only person of color in a role like this. You're the only woman in a role like this. You're the only person that young black people, that young women can look up to on television, in this, huge forum. You've got to stay. And so she went back to Gene Roddenberry after the weekend and said, I'll stay. And apparently he pulled out her resignation letter, which he had already torn up. And the rest is history. She stayed for the remainder of that season. She went on to do I don't know, I think 6 of the movies or something like that. She's a legend, and deservedly so. And this movie sucks, but she's amazing. I'm thrilled to be able to show her our respect.
Yes. Don't watch this movie. Watch some Star Trek instead.
Watch the whale one. It's good. I don't even know if she's in it.
You're the only one who would say that. Well, thank you so much for listening to another episode. If you enjoyed it, please share with a friend. You can find us online. We have our Facebook page, our Twitter feed, our website, twoguys.red40net.com, and also our Patreon page, patreon.com/chainsawpodcast. Go there and consider supporting our podcast. It doesn't take much, but you'll get a whole bunch of goodies. Thank you so much for listening. 100%. We love hearing from you, and we want to hear what you thought of this podcast and this movie, perhaps, and any other movies that you would like us to review in the future. Until next time, I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
With Two Guys and a Chainsaw.